She was born into a world crumbling under the weight of betrayal, debt, and foreign influence. She was never meant to rule, not as a woman, not in a dynasty that had long lost its glory. And yet, she would rise to become the most powerful woman in the ancient world. Her name? Cleopatra VII. But behind the romanticized tales of beauty and seduction lies a far more fascinating truth of a queen who outwitted her enemies, dazzled two of Rome's greatest generals, and almost turned the tide of history itself. How did a teenage girl, exiled by her own brother, return to seize a throne? How did she charm Julius Caesar and then Mark Antony, not just into her arms, but into war against Rome? And why did the world's greatest empire fear her so deeply, even after her death? This is the untold story of Cleopatra, the polyglot queen, the brilliant politician, the last pharaoh of Egypt, who played her cards with unmatched genius in a brutal, male-dominated world. Get ready to uncover a saga of power, survival, betrayal, and love that still echoes 2,000 years later. Welcome to Tales Beyond Time. And this is the incredible rise of Cleopatra in ancient Egypt. If you love mysterious queens, ancient empires, and history's greatest turning points, hit like, subscribe, and step into the past with us. When Cleopatra VII was born in 69 BCE, Egypt was no longer the mighty empire of the pharaohs. Instead, it was a fading jewel, glittering with wealth and culture, yet ruled by a fragile, foreign dynasty, the Ptolemies, descendants of one of Alexander the Great's generals. These were Greek rulers in an Egyptian land, known more for their palace intrigues and blood-stained successions than for wise governance. The throne that Cleopatra would one day inherit was built not on stability, but on centuries of inbreeding, corruption, and Roman manipulation. Her father, Ptolemy XII Auletes, nicknamed the Flute Player, was ridiculed for his musical indulgences and seen as a puppet of Rome. To secure his rule, he drained Egypt's treasuries to bribe Roman senators, and in doing so, planted the seeds of unrest among his people. Revolts broke out. Foreign powers circled like vultures. At one point, Ptolemy XII was even driven into exile. Cleopatra, still a child, witnessed her father's humiliation and the crumbling of her dynasty firsthand. But within the palace, a storm of ambition was quietly brewing. Unlike her siblings, Cleopatra was curious, sharp, and relentless. She didn't just learn to rule. She mastered languages, philosophy, science, and statecraft. Fluent in 9 tongues, including Egyptian, a rarity among the Greek-speaking Ptolemies, she understood something crucial. To survive in Egypt, one must not just rule the land. One must become part of it. From the shadows of a dying throne, a girl was watching, learning, and preparing. The dynasty was in decline. Yes, but Cleopatra, she was just beginning to rise. When Ptolemy XII died in 51 BCE, the throne of Egypt didn't pass to a single ruler, but to 2 siblings, Cleopatra VII and her younger brother Ptolemy XIII. Cleopatra was just 18. Her brother? Only 10. In name, they were co-rulers. But in truth, the court became a ticking time bomb of rival advisors, power-hungry regents, and whispers of treachery. At first, Cleopatra tried to rule in her own right. She removed her brother's name from official documents and minted coins bearing her face alone, an audacious act for a woman in that era. She positioned herself as Egypt's sole ruler, confident in her intellect, her command of the Egyptian language, and her connection with the people. But she underestimated the ambition of those around her. The boy king's guardians, including the cunning general Pothinus and the eunuch Achilles, conspired to drive her out. By 49 BCE, Cleopatra was forced to flee Alexandria, stripped of her title, her home, and her army. Exiled into the harsh deserts of Syria, her enemies expected her to vanish like so many others before her. But Cleopatra had no intention of disappearing. She rallied a mercenary force, built alliances, and began plotting a return. And then fate intervened. For across the Mediterranean, Rome itself was in chaos. The mighty Julius Caesar, having just crushed his rival Pompey, arrived in Alexandria to settle a dispute, only to find Pompey murdered and Egypt caught in its own civil war. Sensing her moment, Cleopatra orchestrated one of history's most dramatic entrances. Legend tells us she had herself smuggled into Caesar's presence, wrapped in a carpet or linen sack, unrolled at his feet like a gift from the gods. The exiled queen had returned, and the game had just begun. When Julius Caesar unrolled that linen bundle and saw Cleopatra rise before him, it wasn't just a dramatic stunt, it was a masterstroke of political theater. She stood there not just as a dethroned queen, but as a living symbol of ambition, charisma, and fearless intelligence. She spoke to Caesar in fluent Greek, presented her case with poise, and made it clear she wasn't just fighting for her crown, she was destined to rule. Caesar, already a man who admired boldness, was intrigued. And just like that, the exiled queen found her champion. Caesar declared Cleopatra and Ptolemy the 13th must rule jointly, as their father's will intended. But her brother's advisers, bitter and bloodthirsty, refused. What followed was not diplomacy, but war in the heart of Alexandria. Streets turned to battlegrounds. Palaces burned. The famed library of Alexandria may have even suffered partial destruction during the siege. For months, Caesar's forces and Cleopatra's supporters held out against the swelling rebellion. Eventually, Ptolemy XIII was killed, either drowned trying to escape or slain in battle. And Cleopatra emerged victorious, now restored as Queen of Egypt. But that was only the beginning. Cleopatra soon became Caesar's lover, entwining herself with the most powerful man in the Roman world. In 47 BCE, she gave birth to a son, Ptolemy XV, Philopator Caesar, better known as Caesarion, Little Caesar. Caesar never publicly acknowledged the child, but Cleopatra had her sights set far beyond Egypt. She saw Caesarion not just as an heir to her throne, but as a bridge between two worlds, Egyptian divinity and Roman Empire. When she traveled to Rome in 46 BCE, it was as a queen, a partner, and possibly the mother of Rome's future. But not everyone welcomed her, and soon daggers would be drawn. When Julius Caesar was assassinated in 44 BCE, Cleopatra was in Rome, watching from the shadows as the world around her collapsed. Fearing for her life and her sons, she fled back to Alexandria. Caesar was gone. Caesarion's future was uncertain. And Rome descended into chaos, torn between his assassins and those seeking to avenge him. From that power struggle emerged two towering figures: Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, and Mark Antony, his trusted general. Rome's empire stood divided. Cleopatra knew she needed a new Roman ally, one strong enough to protect Egypt and willing to embrace her as more than just a political pawn. In 41 BCE, Antony summoned Cleopatra to meet him in Tarsus, but Cleopatra didn't arrive as a supplicant. She arrived as a goddess. Sailing up the river in a barge, adorned with purple sails, silver oars, and musicians playing divine melodies, Cleopatra presented herself as Aphrodite, goddess of love and power. Perfumes wafted across the water. Her throne glittered. Her presence overwhelmed. Antony, a man known for bravado and appetite, was captivated. But this was more than seduction. Cleopatra needed Antony's military strength. Antony needed Egypt's vast wealth and grain to fuel his eastern ambitions. What began as alliance soon became passion, a fire that would consume them both. Over the next few years, Cleopatra gave birth to 3 of Antony's children, and their love story grew into a political revolution. Antony granted her Romang territories. He publicly declared Caesarion as Caesar's rightful heir, a direct challenge to Octavian. To many in Rome, it was treason. A Roman general bewitched by a foreign queen. Octavian seized on the scandal. He would paint Cleopatra as a sorceress, and Antony as her enslaved lover, and the stage was set for one of the most legendary wars in history. The storm was coming, and Cleopatra could feel it. By 32 BCE, the alliance between Mark Antony and Cleopatra had drawn a sharp line across the Roman world. On one side stood Octavian, Rome's rising star, brilliant in propaganda and ruthless in ambition. On the other stood Antony and Cleopatra, lovers, rulers, and defiant architects of a new Eastern Empire. But Rome wasn't ready for a queen who dared to challenge its power. Octavian declared war, not on Antony, but on Cleopatra herself, painting her as the corrupting force threatening Rome's very soul. His message was clear. Rome would not bow to an Egyptian sorceress. The climactic battle came in 31 BCE at Actium, off the western coast of Greece. What was meant to be a glorious confrontation turned to chaos. Cleopatra, commanding her own fleet, watched the tides shift. With Roman ships closing in and confusion spreading, she made a fateful decision. She sailed away, and Antony followed, abandoning the battle. The loss shattered their hopes. Back in Alexandria, their empire crumbled piece by piece. Defections, betrayals, and famine closed in. Octavian advanced, and with him came the shadow of doom. On the brink of final defeat, Antony, misled into believing Cleopatra had taken her own life, fell on his own sword. Mortally wounded, he was taken to Cleopatra's hidden chamber, where he died in her arms, bleeding and broken, a tragic echo of Roman glory lost to love. Cleopatra, now utterly alone, made her last legendary choice. Refusing to be paraded in chains through Rome as a trophy of conquest, she took her own life, possibly by a poisonous asp smuggled in a fig basket, or a venom-tipped hairpin. It was August 1230 BCE. With her death, 3,000 years of Egyptian pharaohs ended, and a legend was born. Cleopatra's death marked the fall of Egypt's last great dynasty, but her story did not die with her. In fact, it was just beginning. The Romans tried to erase her legacy, twisting her into a caricature, a seductress, a manipulator, a foreign threat. But history has a way of remembering those who dared to defy the odds. Cleopatra was no mere beauty in a golden palace. She was a linguist, a scholar, a strategist, and a master of politics in a man's world. She ruled one of the richest kingdoms on earth while playing a high-stakes game with the most powerful empire in history. She loved boldly, ruled fiercely, and died with defiance. She wasn't just Egypt's last pharaoh. She was its last hope to remain free. And though her empire fell, her name became immortal, whispered in operas, painted by Renaissance masters, echoed in Hollywood films, and studied by historians for centuries. But the question still remains, was Cleopatra a victim of Rome's ruthless expansion? Or was she a visionary, trying to forge a new world and simply born too soon? What secrets still lie buried beneath the sands of Alexandria, in the ruins of her palace, in the bones of her fallen kingdom? If this story stirred your curiosity, hit like, tap subscribe, and share this journey with fellow lovers of history, mystery, and power. Tell us in the comments, do you think Cleopatra would have changed the world if she had won? Join us next time on Tales Beyond Time, where history isn't just told, it's relived.